Being stranded at sea is an undeniably horrific concept. So why do we romanticize it so much?
We are now stranded on this deserted island in the middle of the ocean.
Leave this raft. I'm not going in the water.
This raft is literally countless
At
miles
least 60
from
people
the nearest
reported to have
civilization.
died trying to cross the Mediterranean from Libya. Around 25 people were rescued from the overcrowded fleet, saving the injured country a few days after the crossing.
Raft is a video game that takes place after climate temperatures rising has caused the sea levels to exponentially rise, resulting in very little land being left across the planet. Days are spent floating along, collecting resources that your raft comes across in the water. Occasionally, you'll come across an island, loot it for its resources, and maybe even battle one of the island's creatures while you're at it. Raft is an amazing game. If you were to ask me to make a list of my favorite video games, Raft would not only be on the list, but pretty high on it too. There's something so comforting about the gameplay of Raft. Floating aimlessly on the sea draws in some tranquility that you seldom see in other games. Floating on a raft in the sea with no land in sight, limited resources, and a shark constantly orbiting is a miserable thought. But for some reason, in Raft, it's transformed into a dream scenario. Avatar depression is a term created after people who watched the film Avatar experienced, quote, a longing for the beautiful world of Pandora and the stark difference with reality back here on Earth, combined with feelings of hopelessness with the human race. While I've never experienced this feeling in the context of Avatar, I do closely relate to this feeling with Raft. To me, Raft is the ideal survival scenario. I have felt immense jealousy of this game. It's one of my dreams to be able to just live in the world of Raft, and maybe that sounds like a degenerate thing to say, that I want to live in a video game, but hear me out. My dream scenario would be to just be able to choose 2 or 3 people to accompany me and live in the world of Raft. On a constantly still ocean with no land except for the occasional island or settlement, to be able to spend my days floating along, collecting whatever resource happens upon our raft, building different devices and structures, stopping at small islands and collecting things, fishing, eating mangoes, and living without a worry. The freedom to take care of your own resources just sounds so peaceful to me, and there's something about the idea of getting to build and decorate my own raft that just sounds so appealing. So that's the answer then, right? The reason we romanticize the castaway scenario is because it would be fun. Right? Well, obviously that wouldn't be the case. You see, realistically, things would be much worse. Realistically, we would be seasick, sunburnt, malnourished, and dying of thirst on a sinking raft in the middle of the freezing cold and incomprehensibly deep, dark, roaring ocean. Mr. Bucket Told Me To is a horror game released as part of the Dread X collection. You play as Michael, a man who, after a tragic plane crash, was marooned on an island by himself. There are different objects Michael has drawn faces on that he calls his friends. Mr. Spear, Mr. Bowl, and Mr. Towel. Throughout the game, you take care of the basic needs, finding food, collecting water, and going to the bathroom. However, every night you wake up in the darkness to see a fire on the other side of the island, and upon arriving at this fire, you see Mr. Bucket. Mr. Bucket informs you, Michael, that you killed Mr. Bucket, and he was so hurt by this that now you have to sacrifice one of your friends to the fire. You repeat this every day, killing another one of your friends each night until there's no more friends left to sacrifice. And on the final night, you now have to sacrifice yourself. In Mr. Bucket's words, it won't kill you, I'm not allowed to do that, but you can be seared. Though it may not have been immediately clear, Mr. Bucket was actually the hero of this story, forcing Michael to kill all of his friends in order to help him remove his attachment to the island, and in order to rid him of his insanity. After doing this, he tells Michael to board a raft he made, and leave the island. But you don't actually play as Michael. The Bucket's name is Michael. You play as Ira, having been cast away for 7 years, constructing different items that he believes are his friends. And while he's aware that he was only painting faces on garbage, in his words, at least their faces didn't keep changing. This game is a rare case of actually showing the horror of being marooned on an island. Where every other ocean survival game makes it look fun, like in the case of Raft, where it seemed like a desirable scenario, Mr. Bucket Told Me To highlights the horror of that situation, the insanity you would face, the difficulty of survival. So then, there you go. The castaway scenario in reality would be terrible, right? There's no upside, the glass is fully empty, and thinking it would be enjoyable in any way is just some ignorant standpoint based off of optimistic thinking. Right? Alexander Selkirk was a Royal Navy officer and Scottish privateer who, after an argument with his captain about the seaworthiness of their ship, requested to be put ashore on the Mas Atiera Island, meaning closer to land. An uninhabited island located 416 miles or 670 kilometers west of San Antonio, Chile. Selkirk was left alone on the island with a musket, hatchet, cooking pot, Bible, bedding, some clothes, and a knife. Selkirk immediately regretted his decision, but the captain refused to let him back aboard. At first, he remained on the shore of the island, surviving on spiny lobsters. But when sea lions began gathering on the beach for mating season, he was forced deeper into the unexplored island. Once further into the island, he began to survive off of goats, turnips, and many other resources the island had to offer. He built huts, crafted a knife out of washed-up barrel hoops, hunted prey with his musket, and spent his time reading his Bible. And once ammunition for his musket started to dwindle, he began chasing prey on foot. He made clothes out of goat hide and let his feet adapt to the outdoors by callousing after his shoes wore out. After an entire 4 years and 4 months of surviving on the island, Selkirk was eventually rescued by the crews of Duke and Duchess, where Alexander was overjoyed to finally be rescued and see friendly faces. So, back to the initial question. Why do we romanticize being stranded on the sea so much? Well, Alexander's story isn't over yet. Alexander was overjoyed at finally seeing friendly faces, and you'd assume he would be much happier in his new life on the mainland. However, after spending a few months in London, he began to miss his time being alone on the island, and said, quote, "I am now worth 800 pounds, but shall never be as happy as when I was not worth a farthing." Sure, life is much easier when you're able to go to the store and have food available at all times. Life is much easier when there's always someone you can go to for your problems. Life is much easier when you pay for insurance in case of an accident. But you depend on these things. You're told what to do, and you're told how to live. In Raft, there isn't any laws. You don't depend on anyone. You make your own stove, you make your own purifier, you hunt your own food. Alexander Selkirk was independent. He did everything on his own, and once he began to rely on others again, he started to miss the independence he once had. After Alexander's rescue, Captain Rogers remarked, "One may see that solitude and retirement from the world is not such an insufferable state of life as most men imagine." If Alexander missed being alone on the island in the 1700s, it's no surprise that we yearn for the same thing in an age where advertisements are shoved down your throat, and there's rarely a moment that escapes the constant commotion we feel around us. Providing for yourself brings a sense of accomplishment that you simply can't get in your regular life. It's why people experience things like avatar depression. It's why people adore the thought of ditching their current lives to go live in the mountains. It's why people like the Outdoor Boys have such a large following. In Mr. Bucket Told Me To, Ira loved his friends on the island. Even though he knew they weren't real, he loved them because, unlike everything else in our day-to-day lives, at least their faces didn't keep changing.
The person you forgot, the person who forgets. I came here long ago, no one's come searching yet. I talk to buckets, chat to spears, converse with bowls. Now I'm in the ocean, where I'll die alone. I am.